And at the end of the day, it just doesn't work. It just really doesn't work. And so, it's I got to thinking last night. I was with family and friends, and I got to thinking last night, I think I'm going to retire. Maybe I'll step in from time to time and see how things are going. But I think it's time to hang it up and retire from this. And of course, I'm talking about poker. I smoked my brother's last night. Old Gregor, I'll shoot you in the back, Gregor. Destroyed him in poker. Destroyed Woody in poker. I'm starting to think at this point I can't be beat. I really can't be beat. I put together a little montage here. Hope you enjoy it. This goes out to Woody and Greg.
Hey, loving man, you've been called. Oops. What is that now? The 12 hands in a row holiday? Son of a bitch, nobody's that lucky.
Why, Ike, whatever do you mean?
Take it easy, boys.
Maybe poker's just not your game, Ike. I know. Let's have a spelling contest. How about if I just bring your story down?
I'd play that song, that's why they call it the blues, every time they would try and call me all in and I had the upper hand. Great time last night, had a blast. Sometimes in life you got to step away from what you do full time just to kind of recharge the batteries, and had a great time last night. Even though I'm a poor winner, my brothers are actually pretty good losers, so thanks guys for, thanks for your money, I guess. I want to give a shout out to Andrew from Springfield, Missouri, or Missouri, depending on what part of the state you're in. Andrew, thanks for listening. And I also want to give a shout out to Jennifer and her husband, Mike. Happy 9th wedding anniversary. Thank you so much for listening to the show. Mike, I apologize I didn't get back to you on the email. Don't be bummed out. I don't even remember seeing it, to be honest with you. It may have ended up in my spam folder, but I will check it out. But I want to give a shout out to Jennifer and Mike. Thanks so much, guys, for listening. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance, please go to the website, sasquatchchronicles.com. I have blogs up there. There's some additional shows. If you get a chance, go check it out. But again, if you've had an encounter, please email me. I'd love to hear about it. Love to talk with you. Wes@sasquatchchronicles.com is my email address. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Wolf to the show. Hey, Wolf, thanks for coming on tonight, man.
No problem. Nice to be here.
And if you would, kind of start from the beginning. I mean, you had a pretty terrifying encounter with these things. And actually, before you start, I think it's important for people to understand you really haven't told anyone this story before.
No.
As you and I talked last night, it became really clear to me that, as you and I talked, you really didn't buy into the whole Bigfoot thing prior to this. And that's what makes it even more fascinating. But if you would, for the audience, just kind of start from the beginning. Tell us what you were out doing, who you were with, and then what happened.
Sure. Like you said, I'm a pretty open-minded guy. I wouldn't call myself a skeptic, about Bigfoot or a lot of things. As far as, vehemently deny, something like that against the whole idea. But it was just really something that I just didn't really think that much about in general, period. You know what I mean? Unless you've been living under a rock for the last 50 years or something, you've seen the Patty films, and you see stuff on TV and movies and things like that. But that was pretty much, in my world, that's pretty much all I knew, and it just wasn't something that I ever really thought that much about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. How many years back did this happen?
This happened, I guess it would be in '08, so that would make it about, 8 years now?
Yeah, about 8 years, going on 9. Yeah, if you would, just kind of start from the beginning. What were you guys out doing? And
this whole thing, well, to set the, kind of the stage for everybody, this took place in the late summer, late August. I'm not sure exactly what day, but late August of that year. I was living in upstate South Carolina, around the Clemson, Greenville area, and having moved up there a couple years prior to this, I met a couple of really cool guys, became pretty tight friends with, and we shared a lot of the same interest. We all liked, fishing, hunting, backpacking, hiking, all that kind of stuff, camping out. And, we all had our 9-to-5s, but we, whenever we could make plans to, get off work, just kind of like a lot of people do, I guess, what we like to do, in our free time was to, get out of town, get away from people and unplug. And, to this day, that's still one of my favorite things to do. I wasn't born, even though I'm from South Carolina, I'm from, the beach, and, so I'm not, I'm a Southern boy, but I'm not from, the country or, on a farm or anything like that. And, although, I'd been doing this, most of my life, camping out in my spare time, I definitely wasn't, like a pro at it. I wouldn't call myself an avid hunter or
So you and your friends go out hiking pretty often?
Right. We started doing this, fairly regularly. I'd say, a couple times a month, 3 times if we could. If we could all get, and it's hard, for 3 people with different jobs to all get the same time off all the time. But, we'd pack up our gear, throw it in the truck, and it's only really like a drive of maybe 30, 40 minutes to get to the North Carolina border, and maybe another hour after that. So it's not really a long drive. We would go up to, what we'd like to do is go up toward the Asheville area. And if anybody isn't familiar with that part of the country here in the Smoky Mountains, particularly the Blue Ridge Parkway, and it's just one of the most beautiful places on God's green earth. If you've never seen it, and I'd recommend anybody to go there. It's just great if you're into wide open spaces in the great outdoors. Yeah, it's just a really beautiful, unique place. So that was our place, and we would go, as far as like maybe the Tennessee border, Mount Macon. In between there and Asheville and the surrounding Asheville area, Black Mountain, there's a lot of great, spots up there if you're into camping out.
So you guys are up there. Walk us into what actually happens up there. Are you guys camping or are you guys hiking?
We were doing both. What we would usually do is, we really wouldn't have a game plan. We would just the only plans we would kind of ever make is to just find a good spot. And we like to be, away from the campgrounds, away from, the noise and people in RVs and, a bunch of people in a spot. We try to get out on our own as best we could. And we would, being in the kind of a mountainous terrain, that kind of landscape, what we would actually do is we'd sleep in hammocks. When you set up a tarp, to kind of have something overhead in case of any kind of rain or anything like that, and you just sleep in a hammock, you can you don't have to necessarily be on flat, even ground,
right,
as opposed to sleeping in a tent. You know what I mean? You can as long as you find 2 trees, you could be on a really steep place and still, kind of camp comfortably. The only thing you really need flat ground for, I guess, is cooking and stuff like that. But yeah, we would set up a campsite. We'd find a cool spot, a place that we liked, and we'd leave, the majority of our stuff, and just kind of put on the packs and just hike around. And this particular time, we had planned to do a 3-day thing. And we were up there. The first 2 days were pretty uneventful, and we got used to being up there. And it was the third day is when I had my encounter.
Okay, and if you would just walk us into what happened. So you're out with your friends. This obviously isn't your first rodeo out in the woods. You guys do this a lot, camped a lot of times, and you're out there for 3 days, and then on the first 2 days, nothing happens. And walk us into that third day, because that was a terrifying encounter.
Yeah, it was pretty heavy. Yeah, on the third day, we were out there, and we were hiking down a slope, a kind of side of this mountain, and we were fanned out. There were 3 of us. Kind of uphill from me were my other 2 buddies. I was the furthest one down the mountainside. So we weren't all. In other words, we weren't all walking together. We were spread out a good little ways, out of sight from each other, but not that far. But no visuals of anybody else. I was pretty much by myself at this point, and I was walking. What I was doing exactly was I was kind of traversing this. I was going across a slope. I'd say it was probably about, it wasn't steep like a rock wall, but it definitely, it was probably, I'd say 45-degree slope, maybe a little bit less. It's when you're walking across a terrain like that, you kind of have to take it slow. Especially when you got gear on, stuff like that, with the deadfall and leaves, foliage and stuff, rocks. If you take a wrong step, you can go sliding down a little bit ways. So you got to be careful. That was what I was doing, and I was kind of just trekking along there, and decided to take a break, set my stuff down, and get a drink. I found a tree I could lean, my pack up against, so it wouldn't go sliding downhill on me. There was, I'd say about between, it's hard to remember exactly, between 10 and 20 yards downhill from me, there was one of those parts of the woods where it's just really thick, just bramble, saplings, undergrowth, all kind of stuff, to where if you're hiking in the woods, you kind of, you see a spot like that, it's, you think to yourself, yeah, there's no way I can even come close to making it through this stuff, so you kind of walk around it. And that's actually what I did. I kind of went up and around this little area. When I was right above it, is when I stopped to kind of take a break. I had to kind of pack on where, it latches around your waist, and then you've got 2 back straps. It's a big, I had a big pack on me at the time, and I had unlatched it around my waist, and I had about half of one of the shoulder straps off when I started to hear some noise and this really thick stuff below me, and it wasn't quiet, like I could tell, it wasn't so quiet to where it was just like a squirrel or a bird or something. But it didn't, to me at the time, it didn't seem like something that heavy, like a bear or a person or anything like that either. But I could tell that there was something there, and honestly, I didn't really pay that much attention. I heard it for maybe 5-10 seconds. This whole thing happened really quick. The whole experience just happened so fast. Try to slow down and recall, the details of it. But I'm taking my pack off to lean up against this tree, or that was the plan, and I start hearing this noise kind of rustling around below me. And at this point, I'm faced uphill, so I have my back to this noise, and everything just happened from there on. It just happened so fast, and it was just so crazy. Basically, where I heard this coming from, it turned from kind of like a rustling to just like a semi truck coming through the woods. Just crash, boom, 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 boom. And I mean, in 2 seconds, I basically, when things are happening really fast, you still have a million kind of thoughts going through your head every millisecond, and I knew something was about to happen. You know what I mean? Something was obviously charging me from behind, and I knew it was something big. Bear, elk, deer, something. But by the time, what I tried to do was, I tried to, kind of turn around, see what's coming at me. Kind of, like I said, I'm on a really steep slope, so I kind of started, with this pack on my back, I kind of started to slip. So if you can picture it, I'm kind of sliding, my feet are sliding down, because this thing really, surprised me. Started sliding downhill behind me, so like kind of sliding down and onto my face. And the last thing I kind of remembered was before I could slip and fall, I just felt my body kind of being lifted up off the ground, and whatever had picked me up had sent me just flying forward into this tree, that was ahead of me.
So this thing actually hit you?
Actually hit me, man. It wasn't a bluff. I got charged. That's what happened. And, at this point, I didn't know what it was yet. All I knew is I kind of got startled, tried to turn around, slipped, and then just kind of got lifted up off the ground, hit this tree, and
so you get thrown. You're now on your stomach,
right?
What happens?
Well, basically, I think this thing came from behind me. Pretty much, I think what it did was it kind of took a swipe at my head or neck, and if I hadn't slipped the way I did, it would have connected pretty good. But what it ended up doing was catching my pack instead. And, like I said, it picked me up. I mean, like a rag doll. And the left side of my face head went into this tree and it kind of bounced off and just landed on my belly. The first thing you think is like, damn, what just happened to me? I'm laying on my stomach, and the first thing, first of all, I'm just really, I'm in pain. Adrenaline is pumping and all that at this point, but my entire my face, my head, my whole body is just racked with pain. The wind was really knocked out of me, bad. I kind of felt like if anybody's been in like any kind of substantial car wreck or something like that, it was a kind of feeling like that. Like, you're just kind of in a daze. The first thing I saw after that, laying on the ground, was this big pair of feet standing over me. That's when I kind of started coming to grips with what it was that had actually charged me. And like I said, I hadn't didn't have that much knowledge of Bigfoot at the time, and it's kind of one of those things. To be honest with you, West, at first, like I thought, like something had like knocked me silly, and I was tripping out. Like I was like, really? Is there like a a giant gorilla in the woods in North Carolina? I don't think so. Like this thing really knocked my head good or something. But you know, you're kind of waiting to snap back to reality, and you know, it didn't happen. I was already there. You know what I mean? There's no reality to snap back to. I was face to face with it, and yeah, like I said, I was laying on the ground, and I just saw this pair of legs and feet standing over me. That's the first thing that happened.
What did the feet look like?
Well, they were giant. First and foremost, they looked well, they were hairy. They were really funky, dirty. I'd say, you know, if you tried to put a shoe size on this thing, it would probably been like a size 30 or something. It's just huge, long foot. It was wide, but it was a lot longer. They were a lot longer than they were a wide across. Even though, you know, both ways, they were just massive, man. And there was hair coming down, I'd say to about an inch or two before, like, where the toes would have started. But what made me instantly, you know, kind of realize, you know, what I was dealing with was, you know, this wasn't a person's foot, and it wasn't like any primate's foot I've ever seen before either. The toes, you know, if you take your shoe off and you look at your own foot, you know, you kind of got big toe, and your toes, as they're going down, get smaller, and pretty neat and uniform. Well, for most people's feet, this thing's feet weren't like that at all. Some of the toes were longer than the others, and they didn't all kind of go the same way. Some of them kind of went out crooked from the others. Like I said, they were just really big, funky feet. The skin, where there wasn't hair, was kind of like a ash charcoal color, I would say. And, you know, it had toenails, it had all the stuff, you know, I guess a foot would have, but just, you know, dirtier, funkier, hairier.
And so what happens next? You're laying there. It's now standing over the top of you. You're face down. What happens next?
Well, I'm terrified, and I'm thinking, I'm dead. That was the main thought going through my head. So you can imagine just the state of shock and pure fear I'm in at this point. I'm laying face down in the dirt with, you know, bark embedded in my face, but I tried to, you know, kind of turn my head up and to the left to see the rest of this thing, and as soon as I do, I just get blasted. This thing just let loose a roar, whatever you want to call it, and it was like being blasted, like somebody taking a bullhorn, you know, putting it right next to your head. I mean, it almost like blew my hair back. You know what I mean? It felt like that. You hear people talk about, you know, hearing a Bigfoot vocalization, feeling it in their chest. You know, you hear a lot of people say they could feel it in their organs. I understand exactly what they're trying to say. It was just like that. It was like this sound wave just went through my head. It didn't like me. In other words, trying to move and look up at it. It pretty much just let me know, you know, don't look at me, don't move, you know, I'll crush you like a bug. It was truly terrifying, and it started after it blasted me. The first time I tried to look up at it, it pissed it off even more than it was already pretty peeved, you know, and it started doing this kind of like a rock sway. I could tell it would kind of sway to the left and then sway to the right, and then it would kind of rock forward toward me and then rock back, and it did this kind of motion 4 or 5 times, I'd say, you know, for a few seconds. And I tried to turn my head again, and it did it again. You know, it let you know, it's, you know, don't move.
So it roared at you again.
It did. It roared at me 2 times. After the second time, I heard some more rustling in the area from where this thing initially came from, below us. You know, again, downhill from us, and I could tell when that happened, this thing kind of went to turn around and look at whatever, you know, was making this noise below us, and that was when I kind of took the opportunity to kind of use my peripheral, you know, to kind of look up as best as I can, and that's really, you know, the first I saw of it, you know, above the knees.
Can you describe what you saw?
Just, I mean, it was like, you know, basically, it's crazy, you know, I'm seeing something that's not supposed to exist except in like a movie or something. It was just, I was just awestruck, still in a daze, but just awestruck. And what I saw was probably, I'm about 6.5 feet tall, so I'm a fairly tall guy. What I was looking at was probably a good foot and a half taller than me, at least. And I'm not very good at, you know, guesstimations and weight, but this thing was just giant. I mean, it was just a giant standing over me. And it was really the first thing I noticed before I saw its face. And with its body, it was just this thing was just, it reminded me of like a refrigerator or just a huge trash can, like a Pelican or a shipping container or something. This thing was just massive. Its shoulders were probably, I don't know, 3.5 feet across. But what was weird was well, the whole thing was weird, but what I noticed was it kind of kept that general width from the shoulders to the torso and midsection right down to the hips. I mean, this thing was just wide all over, just big and wide. It had a really, really dark brown coat of hair on it, almost so dark it was black, but not quite. And it was pretty uneven as far as the length, when depending on, you know, the area of the body. Some of it was shorter, some of it was longer.
It was round like a barrel, then, is what you're saying. It was kind of had that round.
It was so yeah, it was round. I mean, it was just a hulking thing. Really, really, really wide and big, and just big all around. Just big all over. It had some, you know, I noticed some muscle and stuff, but it wasn't like a lot of accounts, you know, I've heard on the show where people describe, you know, that cartoonishly ridiculous, like you know, wrestler or bodybuilder, but you know, times 10. It really wasn't like that. It was just more stocky. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get descriptions like that here, especially like in Washington State. If you go to the northeast side of the state, a lot of the reports witnesses will tell you is it looked like a barrel. It was huge, but it was just thick, round and thick, and built more like a barrel than like a like you said, a bodybuilder. So it's not the first time I've heard that.
Yeah, it's like a huge oil drum, you know?
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people here in Washington State say. Let me ask you, were you able to get a good look at the face, and how would you describe it?
Only briefly, but, you know, it doesn't take but, you know, just a glance for you to get a lot of details. and remember. I caught the face as it was looking back downhill. It only did so for, a couple seconds and turned its attention right back around to me. And as it's kind of coming back around, I was scared of getting caught, turning my head and looking up at this thing, because it had warned me twice at this point. And I was really in fear for my life. So I kind of, I saw it coming back around and kind of, put my head back down. But yeah, I saw it briefly. That's the part for me, to put it into words. It's kind of the hardest thing, the hardest part about it to describe to somebody, I guess. You know what I mean? The skin on the face. Well, first of all, there's this thing kind of had like a hairdo, almost. It had longer hair. The longest hair that I noticed anywhere on this thing was on its head. And it's almost like it kind of had this mullet hairdo. As, strange as that might sound, but it also had hair on its neck. So there was really its face was the only, above the chin to right above the eyebrows was the only place on this thing that wasn't covered in hair where I could actually really see skin, besides the feet. But it was the same color as the feet. It was that same dark, again, like a charcoal or ash color, pigmentation. First thing I noticed was the eyes. This thing it's just mean. The best way I could describe the expression on this thing was just, if looks could kill, I'd have been, this thing would have killed me. It was just, had this grim, just glaring look on his face. You could tell this thing was not too happy. Really, really intense, dark eyes. It wasn't like, me or you, Wes, where you kind of have the whites of your eyes. You have the colored iris and then a black pupil in the middle. This thing, it's just really, really dark, all the way through. I could tell it had something in there. It wasn't just straight black-eyed, but the difference in colors and tones were very, they were very close to each other. So what it looked like, at first glance, was just these really intense dark eyes. And these things were kind of set kind of deeper into the face, to where the brow above them, it made it look even more pronounced, if that makes sense. From there down, I had a really, really, really wide nose, like this bell pepper, kind of flat nose. It really, as big as it was, it probably only came out from the face maybe an inch or so. So really wide and flat. Even wider than the nose was the mouth. This thing just came out really, really wide mouth. Almost came around on each side almost to the corner of the jawline on either side. And and that's pretty much what I saw. It was really scary to look at.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I've heard they're not real pretty to look at in the face, especially if you get a look like you got.
No, and it also kind of had this look to it to where, like kind of like a Down syndrome kind of look. It was surprisingly, I hear people try to go between, if the thing was more human looking. I hear, a lot of people say, and others say more gorilla. What I saw really it didn't really strike me as either one, but what it did kind of have a look of was kind of like this Down syndrome kind of, cleft palate, lip kind of look to it. And, that's, mostly what I noticed.
As you were saying before, so you wouldn't really say it looked gorilla or non-human primate, and it didn't really look human to you, what you were looking at.
No. not really either one.
And so, as you were laying there on your belly, was the creature, besides looking off in the distance, was it breathing heavy? Was it doing anything else besides rocking back and forth?
It only did the rocking for a second after, the first time I tried to kind of turn around and look up at it the first time. It didn't do that for that much longer after that. The whole time, though, it was breathing heavy. I mean, this thing was really worked up. It was really deep, slow, heavy breath. This thing was really, really mad and worked up, you could tell.
Could you tell, was it female? Was it male? Did you see any organs showing it might be male or female?
When I looked up, I didn't see, I didn't notice anything in its crotch. I mean, it was directly above me, so, if there was something dangling there, I think I would have noticed, but I didn't see anything like that. I didn't see any breasts on the chest, but if I had to guess, I'm no expert or anything, but I would guess female, just because of the other accounts that I've heard. If I hadn't heard, other people's stories, I wouldn't know this, but you hear a lot of the time, you hear people talk about the males, they have this really, really wide set of shoulders, traps, neck muscles, and the whole thing, it's, big all over, but it compared to the shoulders, it kind of tapers down, that kind of thing. Just these big arms and shoulders. This didn't really have that. Like I said, it was just really wide and stocky all over. And, although I did, this thing was cut. It was, it had some muscle on it. That's for sure. But it wasn't like I said, the cartoonish big bodybuilder look to it. And also, I kind of, not at the time, but since the encounter happened and I had time to kind of think back on it, the roar didn't sound as deep and guttural as a lot of people describe male vocals being either. So I would guess a female.
I gotcha.
I'd guess a female.
So what happens next? You're laying there on your stomach. You've seen its feet pretty well, and you're trying to get a glance of what you're looking at. What happens next?
Well, basically, I'm laying there. I'm hurting. This thing had kind of blasted me a couple times, and at that point, my other two buddies had heard this. Of course, I mean, you could have heard this thing for a mile around us, but they started calling. I heard them, calling my name, and of course, I'm not moving. I'm not answering them. I guess they started. You could hear one of them coming down my way, to check on his buddy, and this thing, we both heard it, and I think this thing realized, there's other humans, heading this way, and it basically just, it almost just disappeared. It turned back downhill, another, 5-6 steps, and this thing was gone. That's the last I saw of it. You could kind of hear it, and getting the further it ran downhill, you could hear it, getting quieter and quieter as the distance, it covered, the farther it got. And, within a minute or two, one of the two buddies that I was down there with, I pretty much just, soiled myself. I was just in shock, man, and I kind of just blacked out. Couldn't believe what had just happened to me, and I'm kind of coming to my friend, like I said, shaking me, and what happened? Are you all right? That kind of thing, and from then on, it was just a matter of, I had to be helped up. I couldn't walk for a minute. I was literally felt beat up that bad to where, I kind of had to sit there for a minute and, get my breath back.
What did you tell your friends what happened?
Well, immediately they were asking, what happened? What was that? That sounded crazy. Are you all right? I've got, like I said, I've got, the bark off this tree, in the side of my face. And one of them, took his pack off, got his first aid kit out, and they're, kind of treating that. And, honestly, West, I didn't tell him anything. I was so out of it at this point. I couldn't even talk. You know what I mean? And after, not too long of a time, they kind of looked at each other and could tell, like, this guy, he shook up really bad, and let's just get him up and get him cleaned up and get his stuff and let's get him out of here. And we didn't stay the rest of the day. I mean, it was our cue to get out of there. I think, that event kind of, and to this day, they still don't. The funny thing is they don't know. I've never told them what really happened. And I think, the whole way back, into town, they're like, was it a bear? What was it? And I just couldn't, I didn't speak a word until we were really back at my house a couple hours later, when I felt relatively safe again. But that's just kind of what they assumed happened, and I just never corrected them on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Why, were you worried that they might ridicule you over it, or?
Yeah, kind of a little bit. Later on, I was. At first, I just really didn't. These were really good buds of mine. And if anybody, I think, in the world if I would have told the truth and told somebody what actually happened, I think if anybody out there would have been open-minded enough to believe me, I think, these two guys would have, because, they're two of my best mates in the whole world. But even with them, I mean, it had never been a subject we'd ever talked about, and I'd seen, or heard of other people talking about this kind of stuff, and you see the reaction, you get laughed, the butt end of somebody's joke, or so. I just didn't want it to be that. I didn't, I know my friends, and I know what they would have thought. But at first, I was just, I didn't, before I got to thinking about that kind of stuff, at first, it was just, I just simply didn't know how to express, in words what I'd just seen and what had just happened to me. I mean, even to this day, it's just hard to believe what happened. It's just so crazy.
Did that put an end to your guys' hiking?
You know what? It didn't. It didn't put an end for them. It didn't. For me, it didn't. It didn't put it into it. For me, it was quite a long time before we went out again together. Yeah. It was quite a while. I mean, at least a year or so.
Do you think the creature was protecting young ones? And why do you think the creature didn't kill you?
I think basically luck. I don't know. It's hard to say. I've had plenty of time to think about this, and that's one scenario I've thought of. It's not young, youngins, maybe just other members of its group. But it definitely, when I had the time to think back on it, it did really come across to me as a more or less instinctual kind of protective that this thing displayed. It obviously wasn't trying to intimidate me, or it would have just barked at me from the bush, and we might have had a kind of stare down kind of moment, or a bluff charge or something like that. But so yeah, intimidation, just doesn't really make sense to me, and other things. It really did kind of come across as a kind of protective thing. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you made it out. I'm glad it didn't kill you. It's a terrifying account. I mean, I can't imagine being there, and it probably thought you were reacting, trying to come towards it as you were actually slipping and falling, and that's probably why it actually charged you and hit you the way it did. But it's interesting too, the creature's behavior. I mean, if it really wanted to kill you, it could have just stepped on your head and squashed it like a grape. But it was just kind of holding you at bay. And it makes me wonder why it was holding you at bay. If it was trying to, as you looked up, it was looking off in a different direction. Makes me wonder maybe if there was young nearby or something else nearby trying to get you to don't do anything. You sit here and don't do anything. And then when your friends came up, it probably heard your friends coming and thought it's time to go. That's my uneducated opinion on what happened.
Well, you're more educated than me by far on this subject, but before we even heard noise, I thought it was just me and it at first. Before we heard the noise, after I got charged, and even before we heard the noise, downhill in this thicket. Before that, even when I tried to even look up, it just obviously didn't want me looking up. And I don't think now I don't think it was so much concern of me looking at it, but it was kind of me having a chance to realize that there were other ones in the general area of us. It really seemed like it was acting protectively to me.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's young guy in your mid-20s running into something like this. God, I can't even imagine. It's probably a good thing that you were in shock and you weren't freaking out, because I think it probably would have gone a lot worse if you did. The fact that you just kind of sat there and every time it roared at you, it's kind of that old primate behavior. A lot of times with primates, if you present yourself as not a threat, not always, this doesn't work always, but sometimes, if you present yourself as a non-threat and you're really not going to harm the creature, in the primate world anyway, a lot of primates will back off because there's no fight, so they'll back off. And that doesn't work always. Obviously, with chimpanzees, you got a whole different demeanor you're dealing with. But with these things, I just think it was interesting how it just stood over the top of you, basically told you to shut your mouth in not so many ways and sit there. It would have been nice to get that peripheral vision of what else was going on, because you'd mentioned you heard the bushes move. I really think it was protecting its young, or thought you were a threat, and then realized once it was on top of you, you weren't really a threat. You weren't doing anything. But that fight or flight, man, I say it every time, it really does save our asses as humans, because it puts us into positions normally where you would freak out because there's so much adrenaline, so much fear. We kind of free that whole saying, I'm frozen with fear. And I think it throws these things off. But thank God that we have that mechanism built into all humans, that we have this fight or flight mechanism that I think saves our life more often than not.
That's right. And you know what? It's you don't even think about it, It's like it's programmed into you. I didn't know anything else to do at the time, but just lay there. And that it also had to do with the fact that I was just racked with pain and hurting all over so bad. I couldn't have jumped up or freaked out or done anything crazy if I wanted to anyway.
Yeah, didn't you tell me your hiking pack was bent? The metal part of it was bent from where the creature hit you?
It was. I was, and that's what really makes me think. This thing, if I hadn't started to slip forward, this thing would have, if that blow would have landed on my neck or on my head instead of the frame of that pack, that's it, you're done.
Yeah.
So, in one way, I was really unlucky and lucky at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a curse seeing these things, man. It really is a curse. You're in a position like you were to where, I think there's people that go into your position, to be honest with you, and were never heard from again. They're completely vanished. They disappear. And luckily in this situation, that didn't happen. And it's terrifying, man. It's a terrifying encounter. I mean, it's an unprovoked encounter. I honestly think you slipping, just reacting to this thing coming your way, it figured, well, I'll knock this guy down. This isn't a bluff charge anymore, even though it probably technically was a bluff charge. Because, like I said, if it wanted to really get you and really harm you, it would have been in a perfect position to do it. I think it was more or less to get you to back off. It was kind of neutralizing the threat. And sometimes I think with these creatures too, you may have surprised it by taking your pack off, sliding. It may not have heard the other two guys pass, but it obviously heard you. And
you mean like, what's this guy about to do next, kind of thing?
Yeah, kind of thing. You're snapping a buckle, those middle buckles that go around your waist, might have sounded like a safety going off. And might, like on a gun, it's the same type of click. Might have been the sound of a safety going off, or it thought it was a safety going off on a gun. If you're ever in the woods and you're a distance away from deer or any sort of prey, click a safety off a gun. They can hear that, I swear to God, a mile away.
I've noticed that before. I've hunted whitetail, and I've noticed that before.
Yeah, they hear that, and they know what it is, and usually they bolt after they hear that. So I'm wondering maybe if that had something to do with it, too. Maybe it thought you were going to pull a gun. It's hard to say. I'm just speculating.
Yeah, I've never really thought about that before. It's interesting you bring that up.
But I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing the encounter, man, very much. It's probably one of the more interesting encounters I've heard, especially being able to walk away and not be harmed by it. And then, I realized you were hurt. It knocked you. It probably just slapped you, and you went flying through the air. But I'm glad it didn't do any permanent damage or, kill you in the same breath. It's one of the more interesting encounters I've heard for sure.
Well, I appreciate it, and I really appreciate you, when I reached out. I appreciate you, getting back with me. You're the first person I've ever came to with this, and in 8-9 years, and I wouldn't even have contacted you if I didn't really like you guys' show so much. When I came across you and Woody and Will, and when you first started doing this thing, it immediately kind of struck me how down to earth and laid back, and you guys are obviously sensitive, intelligent, nice regular dudes like me, and I said to myself, this is the kind of guys I could talk to about this, and so I gave it a try. I'm glad it worked out.
No, I'm glad too, man. Thank you for the kind words, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no problem.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. Wes@SasquatchChronicles.com. You gotta know when to hold them, when to fold them, fellas. Until next time, everyone, have a good night. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. Very, very fascinating encounter Rick had. He actually had 2 encounters. And because of Rick's employment, I won't go too much into that tonight to kind of keep his identity hidden. But Rick had a very, very fascinating encounter, and I can't wait to bring him on to have you guys hear it. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@SasquatchChronicles.com. This coming weekend, I will be at Beachfoot. I will be doing interviews there, and I'll be posting them next Sunday for the show. So look for that next Sunday. I'm really excited to go up to Beachfoot. I don't know if most of you know what Beachfoot is, but it's this gathering every year that Todd Neese puts on, and it's a great event. All the researchers, enthusiasts, I think it's invitation only, but it's a great place. It's very relaxing to go to. You get to meet some of the people in the Bigfoot world. You get to hear presentations. Had a blast. I went in 2014. Had a complete blast while I was there. So I'm really looking forward to that. Trying to get things together for that event. So if you're going to Beachfoot, I will see you there. Let's jump into it tonight. Rick had a very interesting encounter. Rick, thanks for coming on the show, man. I appreciate you being here tonight.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And I know that you had 2 encounters. Would you start with the first one? And where did the encounter happen? And then if you would, for the audience, just kind of walk them into the whole experience.
All right. Well, I guess I should first, I know you want me to start with that one, but I kind of should first, I should start first with my first experience with Bigfoot was being traumatized by my father taking me at the age of 4 to the movie theater to see Legend of Boggy Creek. And remember having nightmares over that. But from age of 4 on, I mean, I sat there and we used to go camping a lot, hunting all the time growing up. And I kind of got to the point where I figured, you know, this is just misidentification, you know, people seeing things that they're thinking are Bigfoot or something that are actually something else, or hearing something that's something else. So I kind of wrote it off as, you know, just people's imagination and misidentification until my first experience, which I was rather surprised, having, like I said, hunted in multiple different states, was in Connecticut, of all places. I actually was driving back one evening, probably around a little after midnight, from a friend's house, and I was driving up a road through a mountain to the other side where I lived. About just close towards the top of the mountain, the road makes a sharp right-hand turn and then comes back around and makes a left-hand turn. So I'm coming into that S-curve. As I make that right turn, all of a sudden my headlights hit this large black object, you know, figure standing on the side of the road. And, I mean, my jaw just hit the floor. I couldn't understand what I was seeing because whatever it was tall, you know, standing on 2 legs. I remember seeing, you know, all covered in hair. Its arms, you know, were past its knees, turned and looked at me, and it didn't have that big conical head like, you know, you see in, you know, and people have discussed. It had more of a rounded head. But it took literally one stride and was past my point of view around the other curve. So I turned around, stepped on the gas, came around the curve as fast as I could because I'm thinking, at first I thought it was a bear until it started running on 2 legs. And then I thought, it's probably somebody dressed up trying to play a joke. So I pull around the corner, nothing there. So I pull off on the shoulder of the road, rolled down my windows, turned off my car, and I sat there listening, didn't hear anything. So, stupid teenage kid, I was like 18 years old, turned around, I opened up my door, grabbed a Maglite flashlight that I had in my car, and proceeded to walk into the woods. So I walked into the woods probably about 40 feet and stopped, did like I do with hunting, kind of just leaned up against a tree and just sat there and just turned off the light and went silent and tried to see if I could hear something. Everything was silent. I mean, and that was what was really odd. I mean, not a bird chirping, no insects, nothing. And then all of a sudden I started hearing crunching sounds. And I noticed they started to circle around me from one side, coming around, and then basically coming around to the behind me. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, this isn't smart. I don't know who or what's out here, and I'm here with a flashlight. I think I need to leave. So I turned the flashlight on and bolted back to my car. Turned around, got back in the car, and drove back home. Now, I should mention, though, that when I did round that corner and I saw the thing, it was standing near a tree, and it was like, head was like about even with the lower branch. So the following day was a Saturday, and I went back to my friend's house, and when I came around that curve, I pulled over and I looked, and I went over and stood, and I reached up, and at that time, I think I was about 5'10", and I reached up and literally could just touch the bottom of the tree. So it was probably the bottom of that branch was about 8 feet high. So whatever it was about 8 feet tall.
Well, I bet it hit you then. It wasn't a prank.
Yeah, at that point, that's when I figured, okay, this wasn't a prank. It wasn't somebody in a gorilla suit. And back then, we're talking back in 1987. So, the quality of the suits, that somebody could have bought just for a prank would not have been that. I mean, because literally, I could see muscles moving. It was tight. It didn't seem like a loose-fitting gorilla costume or something. I mean, it was massive. I mean, the shoulders were massive. Like I said, the length of the arms were abnormally long, and it was, even kind of hunched over, too, when it turned and looked, and I think I startled it as much as it startled me, and that just, I mean, like I said, it changed my whole parameters at that point in time. I still did not know what it was, and I was still trying to figure it out.
You had mentioned a smell in the email. What did it smell like? Can you describe what the smell was?
Well, when I walked in, I turned around and I started, and that's what when I was in there, I was being quiet and I was kind of smelling, and I was thinking, okay, it had this, there was almost like a skunky sewage type smell. It just something that you can't really explain, and a combination of basically septic tank, and body odor and a skunk. Probably, if you combine those three, is what it kind of smelled like. And so, to me, honestly, I thought there was a skunk and possibly a dead animal nearby, roadkill or something. And I was picking up both of those. So, I still, like I said, wasn't processing the fact that this could be a Bigfoot. I just was kind of thinking person at that point in time.
How many years later was your next encounter?
It wasn't even years. We're probably talking about a month and a half, 2 months, I think.
Can you walk us into that encounter?
Sure. Two of my buddies, one of which is the one that I was coming back from his house when I had that first encounter. Him and another friend of mine decided it was late fall. We had a 3-day weekend. There was something going on with school that, I was a senior at that time, and we had something going on with school, so we had a 3-day weekend. So we were all of us big into hunting and fishing and outdoors. So we decided, hey, let's go camping over the weekend. And my parents were kind of trying to talk us out of it because they said, it's supposed to snow this weekend. And we're like, who cares? We can, we'll deal with it. So we turned around and I loaded up my car. And at the time I was, driving an Olds Cutlass, so I really couldn't drive it too far into the woods. So we basically drove back up through some streets onto some of the fire trails into this national forest. And I drove to the furthest extent that I knew I could possibly make it back out if I had to, and if the weather got bad. And I parked the car, and I said, okay, we got about a 2.5-mile walk in. And I said, because I'm not going to go any further. And so we loaded up full packs, because, we're packing enough clothes for the temperature and, heavy down sleeping bags. And on top of that, we brought 2 tents, one for sleeping in, and then we had a old military-style pup tent that we were going to use to basically as kind of a lean-to just to store firewood so that we could, if it did snow, we would have dry firewood for the following morning. And then, of course, we brought in some food with us. So, and I should mention I brought my dog. So we walk in, and we get to our campsite. Campsite was... mind you, this isn't a campground. I mean, it's a national forest. It's, all woodland. It was kind of like right at the base of this cliff, and it was great spot. It was like a little glade where it was opened up, and flat area for camping, and had a nice spring-fed creek that ran, right around the area. So we figured, hey, there's nice clean water. This will be the perfect spot. So we turned around and set up our camp, got everything done. Turned around, hung our food a distance away from us in a tree so that, because we did have black bears out there, we turned around, got everything all prepared, got a fire started. At this point in time, it's starting to get dark. So we're sitting here just talking, and then I thought about it, and now it has gotten dark, and I said, you guys, we probably don't have enough firewood to make it through the weekend if it does snow. We're going to have to be trying to dig through snow to get firewood. We probably should go gather up some more firewood and throw it in the tent just to be, on the safe side. And they're like, yeah, it's probably a good idea. Well, about the same time I get done saying that, my dog's hair goes up on his neck, and he just starts growling. And so I was just like, uh-oh. And I'm thinking, my dog's very protective, and so, he'd go after another dog, another animal. So I'm thinking, I didn't know if it was a porcupine, skunk, something that he's going to go after and get into trouble. So I had this aircraft cable tether that I brought. It was a 20-foot tether. So just for such purposes, if I had to chain him up or something, and I chained it to the tree, chained him up. We're looking around trying to figure out, okay, it's dark, let's grab the flashlights and go look. And I said, well, there's no need. We've got 3/4 of a moon. And I said, look over there, see? And I was pointing to the guys. I said, see that tree trunk that's over there that's about 8 feet up? And they said, yeah. And you could see this big shadow, what looked like a giant big oak tree that was just stopped at about 8 feet and, or so. And I said, that tree probably, broke off. So the other half of that tree has got to be somewhere, around it. Why don't we go over there, take the machetes and the axe hatchets, and we'll go over there and, chop up some branches. And it'd be a lot easier than trying to hunt down the stuff. And they're like, sounds good to me. So we started walking, and all of a sudden, bam. I mean, it was like walking into a wall, and that's when I figured, and again, mind immediately thought, dog's barking, it's a skunk, because I smelt that smell again. And now I will tell you, where we were camping is probably about a 15-mile distance from where my first sighting was. And so it's not too far. We sat there, and I was just like, oh, great. I said, and my comment to the guys was, look out, guys. Just be careful where you're walking. If you hear something, move away, because I think there may be a skunk around. And they're like, yeah, we smell it too. So we're going around and we're looking, and we're like, guys, I don't see the tree. So I said, it's got to be on the opposite side. Maybe it fell the other, one of the other ways. Let's circle around it until we find it. And so I'm sitting here and I'm looking at the tree, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay, was it my imagination, or did that tree just move? And so I said to the guys, stop. And they're like, what? And I said, did you see that? They're like, see what? And I said, I swear the tree just moved. And they said, how does the tree move, Rick? And I said, I'm telling you, just watch it. And so they're all sitting there, and we're all watching this thing. They're like, Rick, you're nuts. And they said, there's nothing wrong. And my friend was about to pick up a rock and throw it at the tree and say, see, and he reached down to pick up a rock and then got back up. And I don't know if that's what startled it or what, but our wonderful tree trunk was not a tree trunk. Whatever it was began to run away from us on an angle, and it was running bipedally. My first instinct was this a bear standing up on two legs at first, trying to get a better look at us? But when it started to run on two legs, that's when I thought, this is something different. And we all freaked out, took off, a bunch of teenage guys. I was the oldest, and we just literally left everything and bolted. We ran. All I can remember hearing is running back to my car is, Rick, you're not going to leave me. You're not going to leave me, because I was ahead of everybody trying to get to that car. And we got to the car, we took off, and we drove straight back to my house. When we got to the house, I sat there and I said, oh, man, I left my dog. And I said, and because it didn't, I mean, I was so petrified, and I have never been that scared in my life that, you know, I didn't even think about the fact my dog was still chained up at the campsite. So I said, guys, I've got to go back. And these guys were shaking. They're like, I'm not going back there. I said, I don't care if you go back. I have got to go back. And I said, I don't care how scared I am. I have to get my dog. And so they're like, we're not going back there unarmed. So I said, okay, fine. So I turned around, went to the gun cabinet, turned around, grabbed the 30-30 Winchester and my pistol, my 45 automatic. We proceeded to go back. Well, we're walking back, and we're just getting back to where the campsite is, when all of a sudden we just hear this thunderous crashing coming through the woods. And, you know, my buddy swings the rifle, I bring up the pistol, and it's my dog. And he comes bolting out. And what really kind of freaked me out was the tether had been snapped 10 feet away from him, you know, midline. So normally if he was to break it, it would have more than likely, the size of this cable would have broke his collar, you know, before, you know, the buckle on the collar before it broke the cable. And,
right.
And he is fought dogs twice his size, is not scared really of anything, was I couldn't get him to stop shaking. He just is shaking, literally urinating and whimpering. He was so scared. And so I turned around and took the tether off of him, and he walked with us. We get back to the campsite, and the campsite's in just shambles. It's just in the tent's down. Things are just, I mean, literally nothing was torn up. And that was what was weird. It was like all our backpacks that were already open because we were getting stuff out of them, literally had been dumped over, and the stuff was all on the ground, just kind of tossed around, but nothing was missing. I mean, there was expensive knives and stuff like that, and things. Nothing had been taken. And then we went over to where the food was, and the food, there was no scratch marks on the tree, or the rope wasn't torn. Nothing had gone after the food. So we're thinking, you know, if it was a bear, you know, bear would have at least tried to tear down the, you know, at the food. And if it was a person, they would have stole some of the other stuff that we had sitting there. And so, you know, we couldn't understand it, but we're like, I guess we got brazen because we had firearms with us at that point in time. So now we're like, and I told him, I said, guys, it's, at that point in time, it started to get freezing rain. I said, okay, I don't want to try to be breaking down this tent right now in freezing rain and trying to pack up. Let's throw our stuff back in our packs, throw it in the tent, and let's just, you know, stay the night. We've got guns. We're okay. And then there became a fight as to who was sleeping in the middle, because nobody wanted to sleep on the sides next to the edge of the tent. And
I don't
yeah, so finally I said, okay, fine. I will sleep on the side. I don't care. And then one of the other guys took the other side. They fell asleep, and I still was having an issue sleeping. I mean, it was still trying to process everything that transpired. So I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking about it, when all of a sudden I start hearing something outside. And I'm hearing crunching. And now the years of hunting since I've been little, I mean, my dad, the first time I went hunting with my dad, which my mom wasn't pleased with, I went duck hunting at 6 months old. So, I mean, even before I could hunt, my dad took me with him in the woods, you know, even as a toddler growing up, teaching me. I mean, he's an ex-Marine, recon Marine, so he was teaching me survival, teaching me land navigation. So, you know, and to listen to the forest and stuff. And I'm listening, and I'm going, whatever is walking bipedally. And this is not a deer, even though a deer will step, you know, and can sound like it's a bipedal. This was not a deer. So I'm listening, and the crunching is getting closer and closer and closer. My heart starts racing faster and faster, and my dog is like, at this point, he was sleeping across my legs, and was up at this point in time, and hair went straight up again, and started growling. I'm like, it's okay, and I'm like petting him, trying to calm him down, and the thing stopped, and I could hear this breathing, and it was just real heavy, deep breathing, and almost like a grunting, like, and I'm like, and at this point in time now, I am so freaked out. I've got the hammer cocked on the 45, and I've got it pointed in the direction of the sound, and so I'm sitting there and I'm watching, and then all of a sudden something goes, and whatever it was pushed the top of the tent in. And again, not knowing for sure what it was, I was not stupid enough to just start firing through the tent. And my luck, I accidentally would have shot my dad or somebody else who was coming to see us. And so I'm like, I didn't shoot, but I said, if something starts tearing through this tent, I am going to empty the gun. And so it pulled back its hand, and when I say hand, I could tell it was a hand because I could see 4 definitive indentations of like 4 fingers as it's pushing in. And then it pushed back, and it pulled its hand back out. And at that point in time, my dog just let loose with a barrage of barks and growls. And then you hear crunch, 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 crunch as it runs off. To say the least, I didn't sleep that entire night.
What were your friends doing at this time?
Out cold. And I was honestly just paying too close attention to turn around. I had actually slapped one of them, the one that was in the middle, trying to wake him up. And he was like, it wasn't, there was no getting him up. And so I was just like, and at that point in time, I just was paying attention to what was, trying to hear what was coming at us. It's weird. It was the fear that had overtaken me was like something I hadn't experienced, and I hadn't experienced before, and I you really don't think straight. I mean, it's like, and thinking back now, okay, what would I have done? And, I can think of other things I might have done, but, like immediately run over, just grab my friends, wake them up, say, do you hear this? Listen, or turn around, turn on a light, or do something. But, I don't know. But then again, I don't know if doing something else could have triggered this, because whatever it was, unlike other incidents that I've heard, it did not seem, it seemed more inquisitive than it was aggressive. And the fact that, be honest, I don't think my dog broke that cable. I honestly think it broke the cable just because of how it was broken. It's just, I don't think that it had any malicious intent. I think it was more curious of us than anything else, and I think it was probably due to the fact that we were all young, and I don't think that it saw us as a threat at that point in time.
Yeah, you could be right. It's interesting how it went into your camp and just kind of destroyed everything, kind of going through the packs. And what happened when you told your friends in the morning what happened that night?
Well, I had told them, and they're like, and they said, you're kidding me. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I said, I was trying to wake you, but you guys were like, wouldn't get up. I was smacking at you, and you're all like, and I said, and I was trying to get you up. And they're like, I'm glad you didn't, because I swear I probably would have had a heart attack and died right next to you. And they said, why didn't you shoot at it? And I'm like, dude, what am I supposed to do? Shoot at something I can't see? And I said, what if it had been a person? What if it had been like one of the federal rangers coming to check on us? I go, that's the last thing I was going to do. Had it come through the tent, yes, I would have shot at it. But so then, it's daylight out, and, we can, at this point in time, we can hear the sound. We knew it was snowing because you could hear it coming down on the tent. And so we're like, well, let's go outside and see if we can see anything. And so we went out, and unfortunately, that was the big negative, is that, we came out to about 10 inches of snow, and, which would obstructed any chance of seeing any tracks or anything. So we did and were able to follow. I led the guys through where I could see I was following branches that had been broken. And I will tell you, some of these branches were broken at my head height. And so I'm going, whatever broke those branches, walking through them, that had to have been shoulder height for it, and it was above my head. So whatever it was big. And that's when I said, okay, at this point in time, it's not a person, it's not a bear, because a bear is not going to take more than a couple steps on 2 feet and then drop. They'll stand up. I've watched it while I've been hunting, watched them stand up to see and look at me, and then, take a step or two and then drop back down to all fours and then start running. But I said, this is something different. And we tracked the branches to as far as we could get to where it was an open clearing, and then we lost the trail. So we couldn't follow it any further. But, at this point in time, I think the guys they were like, there's no way I'm staying another night. I was half torn. I was scared, but I wasn't scared as much because I had 2 other people, and I felt, safety in numbers, even though this thing probably would have torn through the 3 of us in no time flat. I still felt safety in numbers. But when both of them bailed and said, no, we're packing up, we're getting out of here, that's when I said, okay, I don't have a choice. I've got to pack up and go with them. But
yeah, I would imagine too, being a teenager, you have that you can never die feeling too as well. Like you're not going to die anytime soon. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're bulletproof. We're all 3 of us were varsity wrestlers and stuff, and we thought we were invincible. But I mean, we'll put it this way: as tough as we thought we were scared to death of whatever that was that night. From that point on, my dad had told me, and that was why he took me to see Boggy Creek, was the fact that when he had been, just after he had gotten back from the Korean War, he and some friends went to Missouri to do some hunting, and they turned around and he said they had all heard this sound that towered over the top of their tent, this scream and yell, and literally freaked them all out. They all came out running with their guns out, couldn't find whatever it was, and later, my dad had saw some documentary, and they had some vocalizations of supposed Sasquatch. And my dad just turned white as a ghost and said, "Oh my God, that's exactly what we heard that night." So he had always believed because of his experience, but I outgrew it until mine. And I think that's one of those things. Until you have had an experience of your own, you're not going to, believe what anybody says. But when you have your own experience and you have witnessed it firsthand and been there, and just and to be honest, I don't know if these things cause you to feel this fear, or if it's the fear of the unknown, or what exactly. But I mean, I'll tell you, there's, I've been, when I was in law enforcement, at the end of a barrel pointed at me, and I was never even that scared. I mean, the fear I felt that night, was probably one of the most severe incidents I've ever had in my life. And so it's like I said, I don't know if they can cause that, or if it's just, like I said, it's just, oh my gosh, I can't believe what I'm seeing.
Did you give up camping after this incident?
Well, we'll put it this way. I used to go out to test my own limits, and I would go out with like a knife and just bare minimum, a compass and bare minimums, and literally live out in the woods for a week on my own surviving to try to see how, what I could take, because knowing if I'm hunting and I got separated from my party, how long could I make it in the woods before help arrived? And so I always used to do that on my own and test my limits. And I will tell you this, that was the last time I ever camped alone. I did go camping still. I still hunt, and I still did things. But, it was either with the family or with a group of people and stuff like that. But I still will not go out without a firearm on. I still carry, if I'm in the woods, I have minimum of, even if I'm bow hunting or something, I still am carrying a fairly large gauge sidearm with me at all times. It's just because of that incident.
Yeah, I can imagine. That would scare the hell out of me, that whole incident. The first one's scary, but I mean, not as scary. You're in your car, you decide to go check it out, see if it's someone, pulling a prank But the second one, man, especially showing back up, your camp is all torn apart, and I think that was more or less a cue for you guys to leave and don't come back. The fact that it ransacked your camp but didn't take anything. And I'm kind of surprised it didn't kill your dog, too.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of surprised about, too, because, if I've heard of them hunting and going after prey, and, I mean, how simple would it be to kill an animal that's, on a tether, can't get away from you. And that's why I was wondering if it was just, I don't know if it felt sorry for the dog, and because the dog wasn't trying to run or put up a fight or whatever, I don't know. Or if maybe he did, just out of fear and adrenaline, the dog did actually snap the cable and get away. It's just, I do. I totally agree with you, Wes. I think that it was kind of like, okay, you guys are in my area, and you need to go. And, and the fact that it came back even after we came back, and if it was watching us, it had to have seen we came back with weapons. And like people say, and myself, and, I've hunted in numerous states around this country. I mean, we moved around a lot growing up. So, I mean, I've hunted in tons of states, and I have never seen things. And, there are very few people. This is the only time I've ever spoke about this incident, or I should say these incidents, on, a forum like this. I could count on one hand, for the most part, the number of people who I've ever actually told this story to. But, I will discuss the topic of Bigfoot with people. And, I always get, a lot of the same things from people, because I'm just trying to feel them out to see what their reactions are. And even if they were all pro and supportive of Bigfoot, unless they shared something with me, I would not share my story. But it's just because, you've got that ridicule factor. People always just go, oh, yeah, sure, and think, yeah, he was, and I will say this. No, for any of your listeners, there was no alcohol. Yes, we were a bunch of teenage guys, but there was, considering the long hike in, and that, now, had we been able to drive in there, maybe we would have been doing that. And then again, we were also all, athletes, so, there was a chance of drug testing, so none of us did drugs. So, it was...
I think it was a legitimate encounter. There's too many little details to the encounter story. And what's fascinating with these creatures, and when people come on the show, I guess the one thing I've learned the most after hearing people's encounters, having my own encounter, is the unpredictability of these things. You would think that a predator would go in and rip your dog from head to toe in half. And sometimes that happens, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they could care less about a dog unless the dog attacks them. I've heard other people who have these things around their property, they seem to leave the dogs alone. And then you hear other encounters to where, they rip dogs apart. I think, if who knows if it saw you guys had guns or not? You know what I mean? It's hard to say. I think coming back, setting things back up from one primate to another, it's that way of saying, hey, we're not going anywhere. We're not leaving. And so it was probably coming back to see if you guys were actually there. Or, who knows? Who knows with these things? It's a fascinating encounter. I'm glad that you guys didn't get killed, as being a bunch of teenage guys with too much testosterone.
And to be honest with you, I'm glad we didn't either, or I wouldn't be sharing this story with you. There's just so many things about it, because it's like, it's like, this really has gotten me, that experience happened so many years ago, but it is so fresh in my mind. I mean, I can still think of it like it happened last night, but yet there's other things I can't even remember that happened, 10 years ago. But yet, both incidents, I should say, for the most part, are like ingrained in my memory, like it happened yesterday, and I will never forget. But I hear all these other stories, and you hear about them being aggressive, you hear about them, attacking, and then sometimes you hear about them just watching and stuff. So, I agree, and I never even thought about that, until talking to you, that possibly, he was kind of letting us know, look, this is my territory, not yours, and then making that second visit back to the campsite saying, guys, I'm not gone yet. I'm still here. This is still my area, yet kind of need to leave. I think that might have been the reasoning for coming back to check to see, were we back there, and, letting us know you need to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you just never know with these things. I had a lady one time who had these things on her property, and they had sent me pictures, just pictures of their backyard, and then these tree structures start showing up around their, like, X's and all these, like, weird teepee formations right on the outskirt of their yard going into the wood line. And these things were getting really aggressive. They were throwing rocks at the house, coming up, banging on the house. I mean, doing typical stuff you hear from aggressive ones. This lady had tried everything, tried lights, tried to light the place up, and nothing worked. So I got Bob Garrett on the phone, and Bob tells her, all those tree structures that just popped up, go tear them all down and break them all down. And I was kind of, when he said that, I was like, oh, man, this is going to go from bad to worse. And what's interesting is she knocked them all down, and they backed off of the house for, I think it was a couple months. They stopped throwing rocks at the house. They stopped banging on the house. It got them to back off of the house. I know it's kind of comparing apples to oranges on your encounter, but kind of the same thing. It went in, tore everything down, and then you guys go back up, back up your tent, pick everything up, and then stay there. And so it's kind of I think it was a territorial display. I think that's what some of these structures people are finding. I think it's more of a way to show your territory. That's my theory anyway.
Well, I agree with you in that respect, and also, my thought process is, looking back now, I think things would have gone a little bit from bad to worse if we had chose to stay a second night. I think that first night, like you said, may have been like, okay, I'm letting you know right now, leave. And had we chose to stay and, like you said, putting the tent back up, saying, no, we are staking claim to this, there may have been, a territorial fight over as to him thinking, okay, they're trying to move in on my area. I'm the alpha male here. I'm going to show them who's boss. And it could have, we may not have been having this conversation had we chose to stay a second night. I think it was probably the best choice that we did, is pack everything up that night and leave.
Did you ever go back to that area after the incident and just take a look around?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, what's kind of ironic is, I went back up there, and I used to ride motocross and stuff, and I used to trail ride, and I went back up driving after I got my Jeep, and I'd go four-wheeling up there. But I would stick to the fire roads, and this really, you had to hike into it. And I was sitting there, and I was hiking towards that area one day and ran across some people, and they had told me that, oh yeah, you know, it was a man, a husband and wife, or boyfriend and girlfriend, can't remember, but they had said, oh yeah, they said, just be careful. I said, why? And they said, we saw a black bear standing up on the ridge line back over there. And this is that ridge, that cliff I was telling you about, that we were at the bottom of the valley of that thing. That is where they said they saw a black bear. And they said, yeah, it was standing up on two legs looking down at us. So they said, be careful.
That's interesting.
And so, you know, that was almost like a validation that this thing's still here. And, you know, you're talking about a territory that's, you know, at that point in time was, you know, hundreds of miles of just national forest. So, I mean, plenty of land for something to be in and not be found unless it really wanted to be. And then again, like I said, or seen and possibly misidentified, you know. But what drives me nuts is that when you talk to people about the subject of Sasquatch and they tell you, well, if there was, how come we haven't found any bones? And it's like, I said, you know how many bones of black bear and deer I have found in the woods while hunting in all my years? I said, yes, I'll find antlers, but you rarely will find, you know, bones unless it's a fresh kill from like a cougar or you know, wolves or coyotes or something. That's just, I think, an easy out for a lot of people.
Yeah, the forest does a good job at recycling itself.
And on top of that, we don't know what their family structure is. I mean, for all we know, you know, they could, you know, be a little bit more, you know, lean more to the human side in some aspects, and actually choose to bury their own, you know, and so we don't know. I mean, I'm hoping someday, I mean, I see these stories about, you know, and that thing on TV about hunting Bigfoot, and I disagree with that. I don't think that's the route. We do not need to be killing this creature. We don't know what it is. We don't know if it's a distant relative. We don't know if it's an animal, what it is, and we don't know how many are left in the world. And I mean, I just think it would be sad to turn around and kill off these things just for the sake of killing them off and proving it. Okay, yeah, we proved it, but now there's none left. You know, there's other ways. I mean, cryptozoologists have found creatures every year. They find new creatures that zoologists say were myths or didn't exist or were extinct tens of thousands of years ago, and surprise, they find them. So I think it's just a matter of time.
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope they're able to prove it, get it out there, and let the public know that these things are out there, that they're real. You can run into them, and you can be harmed by them. Does that mean every one of them is going to slaughter you every time it sees you? No. But they can be violent, and there's been plenty of witnesses to talk about the aggressive ones, the more violent ones, and you can run into that. Hopefully one day it'll be proven.
Well, Wes, I'm gonna definitely stay in touch with you because I've kind of got some plans on the horizon here. You know, I'm currently now living in Arkansas, and of all places, I live about an hour from Boggy Creek. And I also live, you know, not too far from the Arkansas-Oklahoma border, where there's been, if you go on BFRO's website, there's numerous sightings right in that area. You know, I've been talking to some other people, again, haven't told them my story, but who are interested in and believe that there is a creature. So what we're trying to do is, when we can come up with the money to do it, and do it right with omnidirectional recorders, infrared cameras, and that's something also I have a theory in, is that, you know, we don't know. I mean, can these things see infrared? That's why they detect cameras all the time. By doing that, what I was figuring about setting up infrared lighting in other areas to try to draw it and kind of force it to go where I want it to go. And so we've been discussing it, and, you know, a couple guys and friends of mine that are in the military and stuff, we're we're planning on trying to, when we get the money and can get the equipment together, planning on taking a trip out first to the Arkansas-Oklahoma border and spend a couple of weeks out there and try to see if we can, find some evidence of some sort. And then possibly if we kind of can find something and it can get us interested even more, we may take a trip down to Falk, Arkansas, where Boggy Creek is. So if we get anything, you definitely are going to be the first person I'll share it with, and be glad to send anything I get your way and pass it along for you and your listeners.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. And, let's definitely stay in touch. And I can't thank you enough for coming on. It really is an amazing encounter.
It's amazing because of the sense that I'm standing here, and that's why I'm happy about it. But, I thank you so much for the time and, and for talking. It was a pleasure being on the show.
Oh, pleasure's mine. Thanks so much, man.
Oh, thank you.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email, wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. I will see you guys back on Sunday. Have a good night, everyone.